still joining us, but welcome. Thank you so much for being here for simplifying the paperwork, record keeping strategies for organic farmers. I'm Abby Youngblood, Executive Director at the National Organic Coalition. We're really happy to see you here. And we have with us a group of three awesome organic farmers who have agreed to share with us this afternoon some of the strategies that have worked on their farms to make the paperwork challenge a little bit easier, to streamline the process of doing their organic inspection. So the farmers who are presenting today, Mark, Kat, and John, they each have very different approaches that they're taking, and they have different types of operations. So I think it's going to make an interesting conversation. And before we dive in, I just want to tell you briefly about the National Organic Coalition, or NOC, in case you're not yet familiar. We are a national cross-sector coalition. Our membership includes farming organizations, certifiers, food co-ops, and other kinds of retailers, also high-integrity organic companies, consumer groups, environmental groups, and other advocates who support organic food and farming. And we've been focused for more than 2 decades now on protecting the integrity of the organic seal and also increasing federal support for organic agriculture. We envision a world in which family scale organic farms and businesses are able to thrive. So, to that end, we have partnered with the Organic Farming Research Foundation and also the Organic Farmers Association on a series of webinars called Seeds of Success. This is one of those Seeds of Success events, and those are designed to be farmer-to-farmer conversations where organic and transitioning farmers can really share more about challenges and successes and talk through some of the issues that are relevant to the future success of their farm. I also want to just share as we get started our plan for this afternoon. So we have three farmer presenters, and we've asked each of them to introduce their farm and then tell us how they are approaching this record keeping issue, to talk about the strategies that really have made a difference for them in managing the process in a way that works for their business. And the purpose is really for you to be able to hear directly from other organic farmers about tools and practices that are working, but also to create a space to exchange ideas, to ask your questions, and to learn from each other, because there are many folks in the room right now with expertise. So we're going to give 15 minutes for each of our farmer presentations. And then after that, we're going to go to your questions. So as you're listening to the farmers present, if you have a question or a comment, know that you can type that in the chat box at any time. And my wonderful colleague, Steve Ela, is here monitoring the chat box, keeping tabs on that. So after we finish the three farmer presentations, we'll go to your questions and we'll have time to answer those questions. We do have 90 minutes for this session, so we're going to end at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, or 30 minutes, I'm sorry, 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 30 minutes past the top of the hour with a 90-minute session. We're hoping that this additional time will allow for some interaction, any questions that you want to have answered, and we're also hoping to go into some breakout rooms for some smaller group discussion, because we want this to be a space where everyone who's here can share ideas and strategies. We also have a resource page for the event because there's a lot of great information out there on this topic. So webinars, record keeping software, some of the other tools and templates that can help with record keeping. If you see something missing that you think is a great resource on this topic, you can also email us, let us know. We want to make this as comprehensive as possible for whatever resources are out there that are actually helping folks manage their farm businesses in a way that is effective. All right, so I will now introduce our first farmer presenter. We have with us today Mark Green of Wild Hair Organic Farm in Western Washington State. Mark has been operating Wild Hair Organic Farm since 2015. And he markets and grows through a year-round CSA that has a membership of anywhere from 200 to 350 members, depending on the season. We're excited that Mark can be here. Excited to hear a little bit more about your farm and your approach. I know you want to share a little bit about some of the production records and your systems with that. I'm turning it over to you to take it away. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mark. Our farm, I run this farm with my wife, Katie Green, in outside of Tacoma, Washington, 25 acres. We do about 130 varieties of veggies. We do blueberries, we've had chicken eggs, and we've tailored our business recently to sell almost everything on farm through a CSA program. We have a couple of small wholesale accounts and just a very, very small delivery. But for the most part, we're selling everything on site, which has made record keeping easy. So I think how I'd like to spend my time today, I feel like I am. It's my job to be the low tech guy on the program today. So I think I'd like to talk to people who don't necessarily like keeping records. I'm somebody who doesn't really love it. There are some people who are super good at it and it comes naturally to them. Maybe they like the technology or they like the paper, and they just really, that's part of the farm experience that they're into, and they don't need our help because they're really, really good at keeping records already. I'm somebody who does struggle with it. I don't struggle with it in the eyes of my certifiers anymore, but I don't enjoy the work. So we have lots of little low tech ways that we keep our certifiers happy. And I want to just sort of speak to people who are annoyed or frustrated with record keeping or hesitant to certify because they feel like the record keeping burden is going to be really strong. So I feel like I'm the token low tech guy today. I'm going to talk about some of those things. I want to just be really, really concrete. I'm just going to show you binders, show you clipboards. Just sometimes you go to a thing like this and you just want to see, how does somebody actually do it? Like, what are the nitty gritties? And that's what I want to bring today. So I think I'm going to talk very, very quickly about our sales records. This is an important thing that you need to keep, but I don't want to focus on that because it happens to be all electronic for us and it's not super creative. But I'll mention our sales records. You have to keep invoices, and for us, we keep invoices and catalogs together for a certain thing. This isn't super interesting or innovative. We just keep invoices. I'll show you how we do it, but I won't spend a lot of time on that. And then the three things that like require a little more art are keeping the application records. And so for us, that's seeding records and then amendments. So we'll talk how we do that on the farm. And then we have to talk about our harvest records, how we record our harvest. And so that's a topic I want to hit. And then I'll wrap up talking about field activities. So those are the three things I want to talk about, how we handle really, really concretely in some detail. But yeah, let me just say, you're going to have to keep sales records. For us, the sales are all done on farm, and we use QuickBooks and we use Square. So we have a very tidy electronic basis for our sales records. So when it's time to get audited, that's easy. It's not super creative. It's just we pay up for the software, we use it, and it's all there on audit day, ready to go. Just mentioning that. For invoices, we don't get super creative. We push print when something comes in electronically, and we just have binders in the office. This binder says feed. I don't know if you can read that. I have a binder for feed. I have a binder for seeds, and I have a binder for amendments. Those are the three types of invoices that we have to keep at our farm. Those are the things that we might get checked on. And so nothing incredibly creative there. For my amendments binder, I have taped a reminder to it because I don't always remember to add it to my list before applying it. But we just put a page in our binder of our inspection date, and that's all it is. This is just Sharpie on construction paper, inspection date. And then we start keeping records from there. And we just add the newest invoice to the front of that pile. And so when we're getting inspected, we can open it up and we have all of the records for the inspection window ready to go, one spot. It lives in the office. Nothing super creative about that. We do have to keep seed catalogs as well. And I'm just mentioning that in case somebody's taking notes somewhere. What are the things you have to record? We hang on to our seed catalogs for a number of years. We don't really need to refer back to them given our operation, but they're there and they're available if our inspector needs to see them. Okay, so that takes us to things that are a little more production based. For us, what we want to do is we want our records to not disrupt the farm work. We don't want to have to shift much between getting the job done that needs to happen and recording what you're doing. So the way we've got that set up as far as applications go is wherever you're doing the task, that is where the record is kept. And so in the seed room, this I don't think would be super uncommon or interesting, but in the seed room, we have a binder with just the seed records. What did you do on what day? Some days it's nice printout that came straight from the office, and other days it's just scribbled because the plan didn't work. And so we're just recording seeds at the moment that they're seeded. We have another binder that lives with our direct seeder because we found like, oh, it doesn't make sense to have to go to one part of the farm to record what you're doing with others. So it's very, very, very ad hoc. It's going to look ununiform to somebody who loves keeping records, but it is absolutely organized enough for the certifiers. So when we come in, we've got a binder that's here are the seeds that were done in the seed room with our vacuum seeder for transplants, and here are the seeds that we use the direct seeder on. Two separate binders, even though they contain such similar information, but we want them to be right where the job is happening so that you don't have to stop the farm work to take the record. And so again, I like to point out it's evolved over a long period of time to look really weird. Clipboards here, binders there, clipboards here, binders there. And then on inspection day, we show up with like an Apple box full of clipboards and binders, but they all have a very specific purpose. They're all chronological, they're all accurate, they're all field records that are kept really well. And that makes the inspectors really, really happy. And I like to emphasize that it doesn't have to all go on one cool master spreadsheet. It can, and some people are really, really good at that, but it doesn't have to look like that. It doesn't have to look one specific way when you're getting audited. So we have like a little shed that stores our lime, and in the shed that stores the lime is a clipboard that you write on when you, and anybody in the farm can go and do this then, however much lime you've filled up in the spreader, what we're applying, where we're applying it. It's right there. You don't have to shift high out of work mode to get the record kept. You just jot it down right when you go to do the work. I brought that one in. Oh, this one I guess is fertilizer, but there's nothing to it. I'm sorry, you can't even see this at all. It literally is just fertilizer, date, number of buckets, and that's all it is. And we've got a couple pages of this. And after the inspection, I'll pull those pages and I'll put them in the office, and we'll start with fresh ones. And it just lets anybody on the farm, without having to use their smartphone, jot down what they've done. And then the certifiers can run any audit they want to on it, and the numbers are right there. I think I'll move over to talk about our harvest records, which are, cobbled together in a similar kind of way, but they're intentional. And so they get the job done for us without being very disruptive. A lot of our harvest are things that we make a decision in the office Monday morning. Okay, we need 900 heads of lettuce and whatever it is. So you come up with a pick list. And when we do that, we are using some software. We're using QuickBooks there. We're invoicing against the CSA. So we have a nice, tidy electronic record for those kinds of crops that you decide how much you want to harvest on any specific week. And so that's searchable, traceable, and really convenient on inspection day. But there are other crops that don't work like that. Like for us, the paradigm is like zucchini. Zucchini tells you how much you're going to harvest. You don't tell zucchini how much you're going to harvest. And so what we've set up, we want it to be the kind of thing that whoever's doing the work can capture that number for us without a whole lot of conversation, without a whole lot of disruption. So we have just got stationed wherever the crop is going to go, a place to record the number. And again, a clipboard in the root cellar that says how many bags of parsnips you brought in functions for us really well because it holds our inventory. There's a place on there to show how much is out. So it's a helpful record for us. But it's even though it's scribbled on like a yellow legal pad on a clipboard, it's totally going to work on inspection day. It captures the information that they need to see. And so we don't have to text the boss, or you don't have to go online and use some kind of form, or you don't have to write a piece of paper out separately for every specific harvest day or anything. We just want that to be super easy to capture. And for us, the strategy is to put it physically at the location where the job is, where the crop's going to end up, or where the amendment is coming out, whatever it is, where the tool that applies it is stored. That's where the binder or the clipboard lives. depending on the crop. And so, um, like our root cellar has just a clipboard, and for us, it's just a page with every different root crop, and the page shows how many things came in, and we have and we use this for our own records, like how many bags are going out, so we can just go in at a glance and see what's left over as we store things for a bunch of months in there. And I just, yeah, again, it's a matter of just showing, empowering people, like if this is the kind of record keeping that appeals to you, it's going to work. You're still going to be able to get certified. You're going to make your certifier happy if you just have pieces of paper organized well enough, intentional, capturing the right kinds of information, placed where you're going to do the work. That's going to fly on inspection day. The one thing we do have a couple crops that folks have liked to use a Google Sheets for. So we've opened the door for a couple things for people. Cherry tomatoes work in this way. There are things that could get stored in a couple different places on the farm, depending on what's happening that given week. So we do utilize some Google Sheets. The last several years, everybody who's worked at the farm has had a smartphone and wanted to use it on the farm, been comfortable using it. And so we have a couple electronic sheets. And so I'm not trying to talk anyone out of that. There are definitely like really nice higher tech solutions to these problems, but you don't have to go there if you don't want to. If you find the technology frustrating or whatever it is, you definitely don't have to use it. Okay, I was talking about the Google Sheet that we use, and we've had crew that really likes that, and that's especially been helpful on years where we haven't had a farm manager. If we have a farm manager, we have a different approach, but on years when we don't, there's always somebody who's like, all right, I'll log it in on my phone. And it works great. So that's really quickly talking through harvest records, mostly electronic, kept through QuickBooks, but strategically placed clipboards and pieces of paper. And then we do utilize the Google Sheets. So then field activities. I feel like this is maybe the hardest sell if you've got buddies that farm like I farm and haven't certified and are thinking about it. How do you want to capture your field activities? How much detail is needed? What is the certifier going to ask for? Our approach for field activities has been just to keep a running quick diary of the farm. And what we found is, like, in the moment, in the heat of the season, it's really, really hard to want to hop out of getting that never-ending to-do list taken care of. So it's really, really hard to prioritize recording information. So we've tried to find ways in which the information that we might get called upon to produce at our audit are going to be helpful to keep. So we have found keeping like a log of what happened during the day at the kind of detail that we're talking about is very broad strokes. Like, we were planting over here and then we weeded over here and then we finished the day by weeding over there, something like that. So we're not, for our farm's purposes, we're not recording it down to the minute. We're not, capturing all of the kinds of data that you could capture. We're just sort of capturing what happened during the day, generally speaking. And general has worked well enough for us. And we found that has been really, really, really helpful for planning the next year, especially when something goes a little weird. I've definitely had lots of moments where I've been concerned that we're running behind on prepping a certain field, and then I can go and look and say, oh no, we're right on track. It's just, that feeling of always being behind. And so we have been keeping a little bit of like a diary, like I keep calling it. And the way we've handled that the last couple of years, when I've had somebody who's a farm manager, they just start like a document, like a Word document, and they just write a little bit in it every day at the end of the day. And this is part of their job description if they're like a crew leader or farm manager. And on years where we haven't had somebody in that role, that falls on me, or I do the same thing. I just have like a Google document that I'm just writing a couple sentences at the end of the day. And sometimes there's something they did that I really, really want to capture because I know I'll forget it by next year. And so I've got that format, I should say, just to get the information recorded right there in the time of year where I'd be looking for it when I'm trying to make that decision again or reinvent the wheel next year. So having that has worked. And then we have a dummy email set up for the farm that at the end of the day, other years, folks have been asked to quit work, stop working 10 minutes before the end of the day. and put their stuff away, and then just send a quick email what they do today to the farm. And the point of that is not for me to read it. I don't want to read it, what everybody did during every day on the farm. But it lets me search, like, oh, are we running late on sugar snap peas? So I can look stuff up. I can just search and I can find in the thread last year, like when we were doing certain different things. So those forms have been super duper helpful for us, especially in the heat of the moment, like when the season gets really crazy, just being able to refer back to stuff. Did we do 14-foot spacing between T-posts? I don't even remember. Something like that. We can kind of capture that if it's important to us. And then it's findable every year. And then it also gives us the kinds of information we need on our audit. Like this, somebody asks me to tell, I always say, tell the story of the rutabaga. Like, how did the rutabaga go from seed to rutabaga? I have that in the moment, I know what field the rutabagas came out of. Like I've got that captured. And so I can pretty easily look through this journal and show the days that the certain different activities happen there. So I would say that field activities, that's a hard one to, if you have to go from not recording anything to recording what you need to certify, most of the stuff is pretty easy. The big jump in having to write stuff down, I would say, is recording different field activities, but there's a way to make it really valuable for your own farm. And that has been our approach, and it's made it a lot easier to get done and prioritize.
Mark, I'm going to jump in because that was the fastest 15 minutes I've ever experienced. But is there
Great.
anything key that you didn't have a chance to say that you want to highlight really quickly as we're wrapping up what you said?
Nope, nope. Those were my bullet points. I hope that was helpful.
Well, perfectly timed. And in the chat box, we have Robin also kind of sharing. We also auto dictate our field notes into our phones and then can flesh them out in a journal. And I want to just extend this invitation. Like, if you have a tip or you're also doing something that you hear somebody mention, share that in the chat box because there's a lot of experience in this room. I also want to let folks know that there's actually a longer recording of some information from Mark. There was a previous webinar that was made where Mark talked a lot about the record keeping that he uses. So if this is helpful and you want to go into even more depth on it and see other parts of Mark's system, we just put a link to that webinar in the chat. So thank you, Mark, for being here, and thank you for sticking around. We're going to have Q&A after all of the presentations, and please feel free if you have a question or you want to know something more about any of these farmers' systems, put that into the chat box, get in the queue, and we'll go to those after each of the presentations. So we're going to go now to Kat's presentation, and Kat Becker owns and operates Cattail Organics, which is a diversified and profitable organic vegetable farm, also with maple syrup production and a young apple orchard. And Cattail Organics serves a very diverse set of markets. A 100-member, 3-season CSA, local restaurants, grocery stores, schools, a food hub, food pantries across the state. And Kat has developed a great system for tracking what is needed, but also staying focused on the records that are useful for her business. And she makes use of standard operating procedures, SOPs. So, Kat, we're very excited that you can be here and share your insights with us. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Everyone can hear me, probably, hopefully. Okay. So I just had this slide up. I'm assuming everyone can read, and you have a copy of this, so you'll be able to read through this as much as you want. This just is some farm background. Let's see how this is my family being cute. That's like a long time ago. It's not that long ago. They just get big, really. I think that's 3 years ago, and that little like kid with glasses and long hair, that's my son, is now like 6'4". So that's what happens in 3 years. It goes from that to someone that's 6'4". So we are a diversified vegetable farm. I would like to say, so I am going to talk about some technology. I hate record keeping more, I think, than anyone else in this presentation. That's what I will say. I actually don't know. John maybe can like challenge me. But Kat Becker and like well-placed clipboards. I was trained on farms like this. That is not who I am as a person. And I will destroy those records usually. I have a greenhouse binder, but generally I don't trust myself with paper records to not destroy them, write notes on the back, use them for something else. I have a really hard time convincing other people to use those things. It feels really hard to me. And so I think maybe one of the takeaways is that what feels easy to you is probably different depending on yourself and who you are. But I did keep records like that for a long time. So I have Cattail Organics. I used to own a different farm with my now ex-husband until 2016 was my last, I guess I managed vegetables there, 2017, but just pretend that is separate. But we did something that was much more similar in terms of clipboards and records. I will say all of our inputs, I'm going to just talk about a couple of things just that Mark talked about, just to talk about how they're similar or different. And then I'm going to skip to the things that we do differently that I think would make things easier, especially the field records, which are the worst part. But we do keep that binder with receipts in it. However, as a diversified vegetable farmer, we are buying vegetable seeds often throughout the season. Some of those things have changed a lot in my farm career. I no longer send like by mail in like a check to Fedco like I did in 2005. So like that, my approach to purchasing things is different. And so for seeds, I actually, I have the receipts, I throw them in a folder, but I also sometimes just throw them out. It actually doesn't matter. Because I can always send my Johnny's rep or my high mowing rep, maybe for Fedco, that's not, you should keep your ones, but like I can always send them a message and say, hey, can you aggregate all of my purchases and send me a PDF with your letterhead? And I get that the day before my inspection. And so I basically don't deal with that anymore. For inputs, I keep the stuff from our fertilizer delivery and things like that. But again, because of the way technology is now, if you do use the internet, it is very easy to get copies of records if you can't find them. That used to be a big source of anxiety for me, and that is no longer something I worry about. And that's also a pretty small set of things for us, like in terms of the paperwork. Um, I'm just looking at the other thing that we keep in our one binder for organic certification is last year's like inspection report because you always have to like reference it if they ask you to do anything. So it's just something good to have in there that lives in there. Um, and I'm just looking at any differences. I will say that I will talk a little bit about whiteboards. We don't use clipboards. I have a binder for the greenhouse. It's the only like paper record thing that we have, but we do have whiteboards in a lot of places. We have a whiteboard on the outside of each of our three coolers. We have whiteboards where we make lists for the week, and we have whiteboards with orders or pick lists as well. I do have some printed pick lists, but again, those are like I picture those as a disposable record. So let's move on. My approach to record keeping generally is that I don't want to keep any records for organic production that I'm not also going to use for another part of my business, whether that's making my CSA better, whether that's understanding profitability of specific crops, whether that's applying for loans or doing reporting to the federal government if you have crop insurance. So I think when you're building record systems, and you maybe have the same emotional response I have to keeping records with no purpose, or feeling like they have no other purpose. It's like embedding those records into systems you're already keeping. Um, there's a lot of challenges to record keeping. All of my children are over 12 now. When they were 2, that was like just the idea that I would be spending time doing anything other than spending time with them after ignoring them for like 7 hours just felt bad. And so I think that there are life constraints and other constraints on record keeping. And when you first start farming, I think you're trying to keep track of a lot of things. And so the idea of doing anything extra is really hard. So I'm just going to recognize that. Um, there are lots of ways to do record keeping. I think when you think about organic record keeping and other record keeping, just be clear like where it's best to spend your effort. And so if you like keeping like a journal, like that's awesome for you. I like that. I don't want to manage that, but I do keep something very similar, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is our like shared employee and ourself like a week-long overview, which does have an activity log embedded in it for organic production, but that's an organizational tool that helps part-time employees enter the work week and understand what has happened or what is happening for the rest of the week. And so when I have records like that, I'm happy to keep them because they're communication tools. They're not just organic records. Okay, what do we actually use? So we use QuickBooks for a lot of stuff. And there's a lot embedded in QuickBooks, and you can embed a lot of your organic record keeping in there. If you really wanted to make that one system, you could. We don't use QuickBooks for CSA management. We use local food marketplace, which also could do a lot of the things QuickBooks did. So if you're looking at different software systems. There's a lot of software systems, but we use Local Food Marketplace for an online farmers market and CSA, and then we use QuickBooks for all of our wholesale. But QuickBooks also has all of our inputs. So I have fertilizer and inputs as a category. It's also in a Schedule F federal tax reporting category. So all of that is in one thing. I have seeds and plants as another category. And so those are sorted categories that are like matter for my taxes, but they also matter for record keeping. And if I was a different person, I would could attach a PDF to those things, and then they would just live in QuickBooks. We also use Google Sheets. I'm going to give the example at the end. I wanted to do it like in the middle of this presentation, but I have to change my share screen to do it, and I think it's weird. And so our farm keeps a meta Google Sheet. And this is how all of our things come together. So I'm going to talk about SOPs before, but all of them reference this meta Google Sheet. And our Google Sheet has 3 tabs. One of them is a planting calendar. So it has every planting that we're going to have, including greenhouse seeding dates, the field number it is intended to go into, how many bed feet, and then it has some other things like, estimated yields, which I needed at some point that I don't use, but like it could be used as this tool. We do that a little bit differently now. And then I have a second tab, which has all of our inputs per field, which match our soil tests, including so whether we're using compost or we're using custom fertilizer blends or like a product like Sustain, or if we were using fish emulsion, that's all embedded by field number or hoop house system into the spreadsheet. So that's a standard amount based on soil tests. And then we have another sheet that details our hoop houses, and we used to have caterpillar tunnels because they're a little bit more detailed than like a field would be for certification purposes. We also have a maple syrup record now that we're certified for maple syrup, which is literally like a 1-page Google Doc because we need to know how many trees we tapped, how much sap more or less measured in like bulk tanks, which isn't really like a unit that we're getting, and then how much syrup we're making and where we're putting it and when we pull taps. So like that's very simple record keeping. For maple syrup, it lives in its own place. I'm trying to just get through this in time. The other thing I wanted to mention is that our farm heavily uses estimation. We lean heavily into estimation, but when they do the mass balance, which is part of your organic certification, when they're trying to like see like how much seed do you have left compared to how much did you plant, or how much crops do you have in your cooler, depending based on how much you've sold. Our mass balances are on like so close in poundage because our estimation skills are really good. We don't weigh bulk bins of carrots when we bring them in from the field, but our estimations are close enough that we're within our like loss coefficient, like our guess of how much we're going to lose in storage always. And so there's a lot of things where we use like a unit, like a bulk bin with an estimated weight, and it still really carries through. And so we don't weigh every single thing we bring in. I did just want to mention that because that's something that used to intimidate me. Really easy ways you can keep records. One, take pictures. If you use whiteboards, one of these is a funny example because it's a whiteboard of our employees giving ideas on like more signage. But I just have pictures of whiteboards that I have in my phone. But we take pictures of whiteboards at the end of the day. So that I have them for this we have a Google Doc that is a shared document. I send out the Google Doc, or a manager theoretically could send it out. And our farm team looks at it before the next week. And then it's a living document for that week that includes orders, CSA things, special things that are coming up. It has a 2-week preview of what's going on, but it has all the field activities that we're planning for the week kind of jotted down just as like disc field 9. That's like all that it would say. And then we check them off as they happen, or we move them into another day if they don't happen. So that's kind of that's our journal that we're using. And employees can enter notes or enter tasks they want into it. But for the most part, I'm doing that, or my husband's doing that just before the next work day, because almost all of our employees work half-time or part-time. And so we have people starting different days of the week, and we want them to understand what's happened and what's going to happen. That meta spreadsheet I mentioned is basically like the point of reference for everything that happens on the farm. And we have dates embedded, I'll show you, but like because something says March 5th doesn't mean that it has to happen on March 5th. It means we're hoping it happens on March 5th. And I'll talk about our SOPs, but I'm really only writing down when things vary like by more than a week from that actual date, because that's all that actually matters from my farm. And my certifiers okayed my SOPs, which say this. So for certification purposes, as long as I'm not varying things dramatically, the dates that I have as my plan date are fine. And we will note when it matters to us, but we won't note necessarily just for certification purposes. You're just for those records, we're keeping what we have to. And now I'll go back to my field plan, but I'm going to talk about SOPs. So these are actually versions we turned in like a bunch of years ago. So I'm just, this is not my most up-to-date ones, but I had PDFs of these, so they were easy to put in. I was told during an inspection during COVID, I think, during 2020 or 2021, or maybe it was slightly before that, that I could make an SOP so I didn't have to keep such intense field records. And my mind was blown. I also feel like I wasted 15 years of my life keeping these type of records. And so if there's any takeaway, this is what I would copy if I were you. Um, you see this one on about cover crops. That's obvious. Oh, there's 21. This is a specific, like this is referencing a specific year. So we are redoing that every year and putting it in our organic plan. But that just shows you like what we plan to do. The big takeaway is that we're covering a lot of the big like tasks. And we have SOPs for like different ways things are planted. So this example is transplanted crops in beds that have plastic or landscape fabric on them. So I have a list of those crops. And so any crop that is listed there, this SOP relates to, which means that I use my planting date. So my planting date says like that thing's going in the field on March 5th, let's say. That has a corresponding, if it's a transplant, it has a corresponding date that we would be seeding it in the greenhouse. And then all of these activities, like putting on row cover or transplanting or weeding, those things are happening in a pattern. So the pattern is written down here and how those things are managed, like row covers are removed for flowers at harvest if needed. Those rules are followed in that our organic systems plan is referencing this. And as long as we follow the progression as it says in the time frames, which I give myself plenty of time, like 10 days, 10-day windows, I don't have to write anything special down. So we are only writing down when we don't do this, right? So like I'm only writing down, oh, we planted sweet corn 2 weeks late, or we had like germination issues, so we replanted lettuce planting 3. We're only we're only writing down when things break from our plan or our standard, which for me was mind blowing. It means that I don't actually have to keep track of almost any of this, any of the time. As long as I'm using the fertilizer rates that I say based on my meta document. This is great for me. Our growing season, I should just mention this, where we are, we have about 90 frost-free days. So it is like wild here in the summer. Like it is not a time to keep records. It is not mellow. But in the winter, like starting right now, we have quite a bit of downtime, even though we have some vegetables that we're packing. We're not harvesting anything. It's going to be below zero all weekend. And so we can do all the pre-prep and planning. And so obviously, if we move something from field 9 to field 7, we change it in that document that I'm going to show you an example of. But for us, that's one of the main like liberating things that happened during my record keeping that I just wanted to show you. And then I talked about I have some other tools in here, but I'm going to open up just our field plan so you can see it. And can you see it now or no? Okay.
Yes, we got it.
Okay, so this is so again, this is like not yours. So you're gonna be like, oh, what is this? It's meant for me or for like my record keeping historically, right? So here, here's my field ID. This is the crop. This is the yield, the estimated yields we used to have in there. We do that differently now. It says 2024. This is not the one that's edited. So this isn't the one we actually kept our notes in. I'm like afraid of opening the real one and like messing it up. But it has the variety list, if it's treated or untreated, which is another part of your record keeping. We used to have in here, now we have a separate seed list, which you can just make out of the thing that you own, that you got from your suppliers, like right before they come and inspect you. Number of flats, greenhouse date planted, where it's going, and then other notes. But those, this is, if it's a Google, this is a Google spreadsheet, it's a live document. So we can change the actual dates if we need to, or write that in the notes for organic record keeping. And then I was just going to try to find, sorry, the Zoom thing's like in my way. This is the input part. So field number 2 is this size. This is the hoop houses. This is the amount per acre of a custom fertilizer. This is like, this is potting mix that's not relevant, fish emulsion rates. So like that's embedded in this document. It has the total actual acreage for a certifier, and then the hoop houses are broken out, and then they are in their living in their own plan. So this is like what we actually use for ourselves. So I feel like I've covered all of my things, but I think the big takeaway is that SOPs can be like, you can use an SOP in any area where you don't want to keep the record. Like that's the way I'd think about it. So if you should want to have your invoices like in QuickBooks or another record keeping system if you do a bunch of wholesale, because that's telling you about your overall farm record keeping, and it probably helps, or financials, and it helps for taxes. But if there are things that you don't want the records for, don't keep the records. Like have something to hold the place of the record keeping, or a place where you can just check like, yep, it happened. Which is basically what we do with this document. We're saying like, yes, we're confirming it. We're not keeping anything. And then I didn't bring up an example, I apologize, but we do have a running Google Doc each week. But it would have like a pretty basic list. It does have all of our wholesale orders in it, and that's also where we keep yield records. I should just say that, which is taken from the whiteboards. But again, it's not like a crazy thing, I don't think, to like stick that in at the end of the day. However, at some parts of my farm career, it has felt really onerous, and you can just use photos. Like you are still meeting the requirement if all you do is take photos and tag those photos as daily log, like in your phone, you can just tag them as daily log and only take a photo of a whiteboard, and that is enough. I also would encourage people to take pictures. So for cultivating on the tractor, I still take a picture every time I get on the tractor of my feet on a cultivating tractor. So like the other way to keep records in a phone really easily is to take a photo and tag the photo, and then you can just sort all of 2025 for cultivation, and then you're going to have like a collection of photos of cultivation with dates. And often, if I don't have a record, I will go back in my phone. Same thing with the greenhouse. You could have employees literally take a photo every time they plant in the greenhouse, if that's helpful for you. Okay,
Thank
I
you,
think I'm
Pat.
good.
That was awesome. So many tips, so packed with information. That's a tremendous resource for everyone. And thank you for sharing that slide deck too. We have it up on the resource page. I know we're going through a lot of information quickly, but we have that for folks to refer back to if you want to look a little bit more at that. We have one more presenter. I know we have maybe a few questions and comments that have come in through the chat. We're going to go to our last presenter before we go to those questions. And yes, folks have been asking, do we have any livestock producers here? Well, we do have John with us, and thank you for being here. John is an organic dairy farmer from Abbotsford, Wisconsin. He's a member of Organic Valley. He's loved dairy farming his whole life. He got his first Jersey cow when he was 13. He grew his herd from there. He is passionate about organic integrity. He's also passionate about being efficient. As the only labor unit on his farm, he wants to make sure that he is having those efficiencies, and he uses software and mobile apps to make record keeping easier. He milks 35 cows and manages 200 organic acres of pasture. So, John, we're so glad that you're here. Thank you for being here to talk with us about your systems.
All right, yeah. So as I was just introduced, I'm John in North Central Wisconsin. I've been dairy farming in Wisconsin for 6 years, the week after Thanksgiving. Currently milking 37 cows and yeah, managing 160, 200 acres of organic land. And I'm the only person on my farm um, doing the labor and the bookkeeping. I don't own any land, so I have a landlord, but he's not involved in the farming operation. So I have to maximize every every minute that I have because I don't like to work all the time. So I like to take time off and I like to take a nap every day. So I don't want to just sit and do bookwork when I'm not taking care of the cows. So when I first moved here, I was doing all of my paperwork. My cow records were all paper, and I found it irritating to be taking notes in the barn and coming back to the house and transcribing that onto my cow card or whatever I was keeping at the house because I didn't want to keep those records in the barn because it was too dirty and they might get ruined. Sort of like what Kat said. I don't trust myself with paper records at all. Like, it's just very nerve-wracking to be afraid you're going to lose that paper record because it's all you have. So I started looking for some different options, specifically for cow records and field records, because I was just getting so frustrated with writing down everything twice. Like, I don't want to write down twice. I want to do something once so it's done. So I found this company, Field Margin. They are based in London in the UK, but I think since then they've been bought out by Agrina, which is a Danish company. But they're in Europe, they're very big on efficient records for their carbon. Um, they have lots of rules on their carbon footprints. That's the word I'm looking for. So they've developed apps that make it easy for farmers to enter data on as they're doing it. That way, you're not wasting a whole bunch of time writing stuff down and then redoing it again. So I'm going to share my screen here and show you. Let me see if I can get this up here. I will show you the Field Margin app on my phone. I was going to show it to you on a desktop, but I could not get it to work. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to show you around this app here. It is quite a lot of work to set up in the first place, but once you have it set up, I never have to go on my desktop version. Everything can be done from this app. So as you can see here, I have all my fields, uh, field numbers, and that also correlates to the field number on my organic system plan. And if I click on one of these fields, it's going to pop up. And if I have a job scheduled, I can go to the to-do tab and it's going to have, say if I scheduled that I was going to make hay this week, it would pop up here and I could complete the job here. And I also have history. So I would have grazed my cows on this field as well as taken first, second, third cut hay and put manure on. And I literally just enter all this information into the app as I'm doing it. And I can start a field job here. Say I want to harvest. And then if I'm a grass-based dairy, I do feed grain, but I'm only harvesting bales. And then we can continue, and then you can select all the fields that you want for this field job. And then you just hit next. And then when you're done, it will pop up in your jobs tab. And it's just about as easy as that. And then see it's popped up here, field job. And if I say, okay, I've got this done, I go in, enter however many bales I did, and save it, and then we're done. And then I recorded the harvesting for that field. And as I said, this is crop records, manure spreading, fertilizer, anything you want, you can do in this app for field records. And you can do as many groups of animals as you want as well. This is my milk cow herd, and it has the whole history of the cows, where they graze, how long they graze there. It's just amazing. And I do this literally as I move them on the pasture. It takes 2 seconds to pull out the app and do this. And then I love the app for data entry, but it's not the best for inspection time. However, on the desktop version, you can go, that's why I was hoping to show you on the desktop. There's a reports page where you can go and generate reports on all of this data so that it's in a spreadsheet for your organic inspector. So it's easy for him or her to see. So I just love this app. It's been super helpful. I think it costs me $15 a month, but the amount of time it saves me, it's worth every penny. So now I'm going to talk about another app, which is Dairy Comp from Valley Ag Systems. They're a California-based company. Pretty much every dairy producer is familiar with it on some level. So this is the home screen of my Dairy Comp app, and I can just search for any animal. You can search by name or ear tag, whatever you choose. I typically use name because my cows are all named because I'm a pretty small farm. So, and then it opens up into your cow card, your digital cow card. No notes, no paper cow card, no writing. And then it tells me at the top, the cow's fresh, 63 days in milk. And then I can go to the items tab, and it's going to give me all her ID. I have registered jerseys, so I keep all my registration information in there, as well as pedigree, her sire and dam information, and then it'll have her reproduction information. We can go to the events tab. And the reason I picked this cow to show you guys today, a lot of my cows don't have a lot of issues, but this cow, she came in fresh and she had a lot of metabolic issues. So she came in fresh, as you can see here, October the 8th. And then she got milk fever. And so I had to IV her calcium. This is all recorded cow side in the app. Takes no more than a few seconds. This app also works if you have no internet. It'll just back up later once you're connected. Then the cow got ketosis. She got a dextrose IV, and she ended up having a displaced abomasum. So the vet had to come out and do surgery on her. And then she had to have Banamine, which means she gets a milk withhold, which is a very important organic record. So my inspector can come in and he can audit this cow and be like, oh, he recorded that he used Banamine or Flunixin on this cow, which is an important record. Flunixin is a painkiller for dairy cows that is allowed in organic systems. And I also keep milk recording tests in here. I test milk once a month. She has not been tested yet because she came fresh after my last test, but that'll all pop up in here as she's tested. And then it'll all her lactation information. She's the 5th lactation cow, her total milk, total fat and protein, and her total 305 average is all in here. So this app is very good for keeping my herd records in a compact, easy to get to place. So I am going to hop off here, see if I can stop sharing my screen and talk about some other things that I wanted to mention. Okay, now what's it doing here? All right, sorry about that. I also use QuickBooks for all of my sales records, QuickBooks Online, and the organic records. My sales record are milk, call cows, organic hay, and bull calves that I sell. And the organic inspector doesn't really care about bull calves, but so I have a separate category for calf sales in QuickBooks and a category for call cows. And when I sell a call cow, I go into QuickBooks and I type in the description her ear tag number and if she was sold as organic or conventional. And then when inspection time comes, I can pull that spreadsheet from QuickBooks, and then I have to keep my check stub that I get from the auction where I sold the cow, So they can verify that she was sold as organic. They can check that against my sale record as well as my livestock list, which my livestock list is um what do you call a spreadsheet, because MOSA requires a specific spreadsheet that we use for our livestock list. Some certifiers you could probably get away with not using a specific list. You could probably download your livestock list from Dairy Comp, which would save a lot of work, because the biggest thing I have to do to get ready for my inspection is update my livestock list, because whatever Dairy Comp generates is not sufficient. Mostly because of the origin of livestock rule, they're really cracking down on being able to trace that animal. So it makes a lot of sense, and I don't mind it. It takes me maybe an hour to update that list once a year, taking that info from Dairy Comp and transferring it onto the MOSA spreadsheet. And the only other, I keep no paper records. I have to keep check stubs from the auction for cull cows, and I have to keep feed receipts from the feed mill. That is the only paper records I have. Feed out records for my hay that I grow here on the farm. I use my notes app on my phone, and I just type in the date, how many bales were fed, to what group of animals, and that's it. And it's just been organic inspection this year was the shortest I've ever had, the happiest inspector I've ever had, and just so low stress. Like, it's just been really good since I switched to these digital platforms. They've been super helpful. So yeah, I don't think I really have any more to say. So
John, that was really fantastic. It's great to hear how things have gotten better, have gotten easier after you found some apps that really work for you in real time. And this has been a lot of fantastic information from this amazing group of presenters. We do want to go now to some of the questions and comments that have emerged during the presentations. So we're going to spotlight everybody from our farmer presenter group. And also my colleague Steve Ela is going to join us here. And I'm going to lean on you a little bit, Steve. I know you've been taking a look at the chat box and looking to see the questions that have popped up as the farmers have been presenting. So I'll kind of lean on you to help guide as to where we go first with the questions.
Sure, and I think a lot of things have been partly comments. Like for example, Robin just said that they auto dictate into their phones and then flush them out in a hard copy journal later. This was kind of very simple thing to do. You have your phone with you, just put that voice memo in. Colleen just said, and this was kind of reiterated later, take the pictures of whiteboards and save them in a Google folder with the date. That is just enough to keep that record string. We had several people ask for about organic record keeping for livestock. So Mark, you or John, I mean, you satisfied that. And Mark, I think you may have some chickens. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, or anything that's specific for livestock versus row crops or field crops, specialty crops.
Yeah, sure. Chickens for us are pretty easy because each flock will stay in one main field. It gets rotated with portable fences, but each flock gets a spot. And so for our particular operation, we don't have to do a lot of work to record location for chickens. So that's a very easy thing to note somewhere. And then sales records are kept electronically, and we buy feed from just one place. And so those are just invoices that have to get stored. Any other little purchases are kept in the same binder with feed, just chronologically. And so that happens mostly in the office. That's a very easy record keeping for us. It's only, I should say, laying hens. So we're only raising chickens for eggs.
Great. And Aaron, if you have, after John's presentation, where he really went into some of those details, if you have other questions, just drop them into the chat and we can be more specific. Just as a technology thing, Tim noted that he's old school and wanted to know what tag the photo means. And so, Kat, you put something in the chat, but why don't I have you just talk about that? I'm sure Tim is not the only one.
Sure. I mean, so I'm not going to be like, well, I am. I'm going to be like, depending on your type of phone. So, I mean, depending on your type of phone, there's different ways to tag photos. And an iPhone, you like swipe specifically on a photo and then you can tap, you can type in. You can also make a folder. Like you could just make a single photo folder no matter what you use. If it's Google, I think Android has a similar one. iPhones have one where, or an Apple, and you could just make a photo folder that's like organic and just move everything into save it as in that folder. That's a really easy way to work around. Otherwise, you can just or use the internet to look up how your specific phone you do it. But usually there's just like a little button or three dots or a swipe, and then you can type in just whatever you wanted to do. So you could be as specific or general as you want, right? So depending on what you're using that information for, like in other purposes or what you want to look at, like if you want to look at cultivation dates. I always take a picture of the first day that we get in the field because that helps my spring anxiety. That's not practical. I mean, it matters for organic records to know when we got in the field, and same thing with like when we tap trees, but it also is mostly psychologically good. I think Mark mentioned that where you're like, I'm behind, and you're like, or exactly average. Like, and so, especially when your neighbors are doing a flurry of activities. So that's a thing. Someone also asked in the chat about if there's a specific SOP. There isn't. But if, there's the one that I put, which you can see in the presentation. I think it's laying out benchmark dates. And then I sent mine in to my certifier and asked for feedback, which is easy. And so they can tell you what they want. It would be similar to like a label, like you're going to submit a label that meets the requirements. And then you want to ask them what other information would you want on an SOP. And then we just differentiate by systems that are different. So like hoop house tillage is different than field and what tools we use. So we just differentiate that way.
Great. And we had a question. Adolf just said that if you meet a very picky organic auditor or inspector, all records have to include supportive proofs. Have any of you run into that issue where your picture is not uh, enough? Sounds like just needing kind of a double thing.
I think if all of your pictures were from the day before your inspection, that might look kind of weird. But for the most part, your pictures are time stamped, and that's pretty convincing. I think, yeah, how easy to forge would your records be is maybe a consideration, but it's never been something that's actually come up. But I feel like for my records, there's a lot of stuff that's very convincing about it. And, if you're keeping a file, it shows when you started the file. You can be able to show previous histories of it or when edits were made. I think, yeah, for the most part, yeah, if you're actually keeping the record, there's going to be some element of it that proves that it's, not just made up the day before.
We had a question from Sarah about how you all keep employee records specifically for tax purposes and respect to reporting, withholding. Um, right now, each employee has their own Google sheet with their own tax info in a tab. But then when I need to report it, I need to sum all their hours withholding info. So how do you all deal with that?
I know John doesn't have any employees, so I'm going to speak for him. But I hire a payroll accountant because it is $75 a month, which is so we submit hours and they do everything else. They also do our workman's comp audit, which in Wisconsin, if you have workman's comp, there's an annual workman's comp audit because we have a statewide specific type of system. So I think that's one of my favorite things. And also QuickBooks technically doesn't do agricultural, in case you're doing your own, you can, but technically you're not doing agricultural labor reporting. There's a 942 and a 943. I forget which one QuickBooks doesn't do. So if you're really by the books and you're using QuickBooks Online, you can't do it with the actual online thing. It doesn't matter to most people. They just do it that way. But that we don't do it ourselves because it's not, I'm going to mess it up for sure.
And Mark, do you?
Yeah, we have our employees fill out timesheets, and this is a Google form, and then we do payroll ourselves through QuickBooks. We have a super our archaic version, a desktop version that we can use just to log payroll, and then we use QuickBooks Online for most everything else. And that will work for payroll taxes here, but we hire an accountant to do like the annual taxes because QuickBooks won't interface with that. But for payroll, we're using QuickBooks, doing it ourselves.
Steve, I'm going to jump in with a little bit of a time check, and I see more and more questions coming in, which is great. And I see some peer-to-peer exchange, which is really helpful. Let's take two more questions, and then we are going to go into breakout rooms. I know we're a little tight on time, but folks can also respond to some of the questions in the chat. And I want to give us a chance in breakout rooms to just allow for more voices in the conversation. So why don't we take two more questions quickly, and then we're going to go to the breakouts.
I think I'll jump ahead to Ayesha is asking, does anyone have value-added product records? That's a little different take on things if you're not just selling completely fresh. Kat?
Maple syrup is I mean, even though maple syrup just gets boiled, it is. And we also grow some seed on contract for an organic seed company. That is also this like weird, it's in a weird category. So it's also like treated as if it's a value-added product, in terms of labeling and handling requirements, which makes it really weird because it's actually more like a wholesale vegetable. But I'm happy to talk about those rules. They're their own spreadsheets, but pretty easy.
And then I'll just maybe kind of combine, well, two questions. One should be quick. For those that keep physical records, do you scan to digital copies for historical use from audit to audit end of year? So do you scan those things in, Mark?
I will often take pictures. I also am worried about like, the binder getting lost or something like that. So I have a bunch of pictures, but at the end of the year, depending on what the record is, either when we have our certification or the end of the calendar year, I just bring them in and put them in the office, and they live in a binder. So when we're done with them, we retire them to a binder, and that's it. I don't feel the need to back them up beyond that. During the season, though, I'm taking pictures. I don't use a scanner for anything, but I will definitely take pictures of handwritten notes if the mood strikes, because it's nice to know that you have it backed up to at least a certain date.
Yeah. And then there was one specific question for dairy in terms of having a standard operating procedure that you're going to move animals from plot to plot versus having to keep exact records of each plot.
I suppose you could do that, but grazing is an art, not a science. So I would never be able to have a standard operating procedure because I don't know where they're going to go from week to week because it depends on how much rain we get and how warm it is and how fast the grass grows. So it's way easier to just have the app and do it as I need to.
And
Abby, why don't we?
one
Yeah,
last question that maybe got buried but came again. How much does the Dairy Comp app cost you, John? And you answered field margin, I think you said was about 15 per month, but what about Dairy Comp?
Yes, and 15 a month, that may have been the starter, and I think I upgraded, so I think it might be 25 now, but I'm not sure on that. Dairy Comp is per head. Um, I'm not sure how much it is per head. Mine is $40 a month, I believe, and that's for 35 cows, so a little over $1 a cow per month.
Great.
And I think it goes down the more animals you have. I think it's a progressive pricing chart, so.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you. I know, Kat, you in particular, but all of you have been kind of trying to respond to some of the questions we didn't get to in the chat. So I appreciate folks continuing to share info that way. And thank you for all these insights. And as we're coming back together and just closing today's session, I want to invite you, if you saw a resource, if you learned of a resource or gained a tip that is going to help you, maybe put that now in the chat box. We'll have just a little bit more sharing that way. If you heard something that you think could help you with a challenge that you're facing, maybe share that out as well in the chat box. We have a couple minutes left, so a couple more minutes for those ideas to flow. I'm going to say just a few things by way of closing. First, I want to thank Mark, Kat, and John for being here and for taking time to think about how to present the system that they use to this group. We're really appreciative of your time. And I think somebody said it in the chat, but you have very different approaches. And so it was helpful to hear from three farmers who are tackling record keeping in different ways. I also want to say thank you to Steve Ela and Harriet Bihar and Callie, my colleagues who are here helping support this event, and also to Organic Farming Research Foundation and Organic Farmers Association for helping promote our event and for the collaboration that we've had to produce the Seeds of Success webinar series. And speaking of Organic Farming Research Foundation, I want to make sure that I let you know that their National Organic Farmer Survey is now open. It takes about 25 minutes to complete this survey. It's a really important survey because the information gathered through the survey helps shape research, it helps shape education, advocacy that the National Organic Coalition does, and it helps provide more resources for organic farmers. So I encourage you, if you are an organic or a transitioning farmer, I really encourage you to consider filling out the survey. It's open through January 31st of 2026. And they will also give you a Johnny's Selected Seed discount and a chance at some farm-related prizes. So if you take a few minutes to fill that out, that's super helpful. We're putting a link in the chat to where you get information, get a copy of that survey. And then just three brief announcements as we are closing. We welcome your feedback on the event. We have a short evaluation survey, and we'll put a link to that in the chat box and send it in a follow-up email. And that is very helpful to us, just thinking about how to make the conversations meaningful and productive. That will help us with any future events. Second, I want to let you know that the National Organic Coalition is hosting our next event on Friday, January 16th. It's from 2 to 4:30 Eastern Time, and the event is called Why Are We Losing Organic Farms? Understanding the Challenges and Charting a Path Forward. Unfortunately, we do have a trend of just a more recent trend of crop and livestock operation numbers going down in most states. So we're going to look at some of that data and try to understand it and also think about what we can do to try to provide more support or better policies that help farms stay in organic and stay in business. We don't have the registration up just yet, but we'll have that available very soon on the events page of our website. So we'll send that as a follow-up message. And then, as I mentioned previously, we do have a resource page for the event today. So you can find links to some of the software and some other webinars and tools that could be helpful on record keeping. And if you see something not listed on that resource page that you think would help others, please let us know. And like I said, we'll have the recording up on that resource page as well. So I just want to say a big thank you. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for the partnership. Thanks for all the great ideas that were shared and the information we exchange with each other. And we're excited to stay in touch. I wish you a great rest of your afternoon. Thanks, everybody.